Hey there, my friends, and welcome back to Carpo's Carpo's Corner, Carpo's Channel, Carpo 719, 15-minute free thinking, whatever I decide to call it this week. This week I'm going to talk about psychedelics. In the previous video I just made, I rambled on for 25 minutes. The intention was to discuss psychedelics, as I brought up Terence McKenna and my experiences when I was young, but I never got to the point, because it tended to be more of a ramble and a rant about being young, using social media, and the whole gamut that we're running of all this crap that we have to deal with right now. Since I was young, I have been a strong advocate for the use of psychedelics properly to understand ourselves. The reason I brought up Terence McKenna was because he's always been such a humorous fellow. He passed away, I think, in the 80 or 90, but I think it was around 90, but he was a very strong advocate for psychedelics, psilocybin, LSD. Didn't mention MDMA as much, but it's not really considered a psychedelic. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be a psychedelic. What I'm talking about is these novel compounds that we have discovered over the years that allow people to see deeper within themselves and understand their souls, if you want, a little bit better. As for me, I'm not a religious person, but I'm not an atheist. And the discussion of God, lowercase g for me, is everything, all encompassing. It doesn't require any definition. It's what the mystics or the ancients often called the all, with a capital A. The all was everything. And to me, I find God in a blade of grass or a tree just as much as in a plastic figurine. Everything that we've created is part of creation. Every termite mound, everything in space, it's all part of the same system. And we're fortunate enough to be a separate system within that system that we call life. And life is defined by the exact opposite of what we see in nature, which is atrophy. Things fall apart, things decay, but things grow. You could say a mountain grows, but a mountain might be growing due to the decay of the seafloor, you see. But as soon as life takes hold, we have multicellular organisms, several different organs, which are evolving ever more complexly to eventually culminate in what we call human beings. What does it mean to be a human being? It's one of the most difficult things for us to understand because, well, goddamn it, we're human beings. And it's like the consciousness conundrum. It's impossible. It's a paradox. You can't study consciousness when you're conscious because you're affecting the study because you're aware of it. This is how we have hung up the hat on trying to understand any spiritual aspects of ourselves and tried to allow science to do our bidding for us. Unfortunately, science cannot answer the most important questions, and I am a science buff. I love science. I love astronomy. I love understanding how the organisms work, how cells work, what's in an atom, down to the particles and quarks and gluons and up and down and quarks. There's just so much weird shit that we learned about the universe, quantum mechanics, and how physics just aren't quite understood as well as we would like them to be. We have to rewrite our whole history on how the universe was even born. And believe me, on a science note, if you can believe that there was a big bang where everything in the universe came out of something, as small as a particle, I don't see how you could think believing in God is even any weirder. You see what I mean? Science itself requires faith that things happen the way that we think they happened due to our mathematics, or looking at redshift in faraway galaxies, trying to understand how galaxies are held together so we come up with dark matter, or these ideas that we can't prove, that we have no idea it must be dark matter. All of these things we distract ourselves with, trying to understand what's going on out there, what happens in the earth, what happens out in space. Yet we don't give a second look to what's going on in our fucking hearts. in our minds. We think we understand ourselves, but we settle on a certain mentality and we stick with that. And when I say we, I just mean what I see as a majority of society, who seems content to say, this is what I believe, these are the things that I was taught, therefore this is life. And I call bullshit on that. When you take psychedelics of any type, and the older you are when you do them, the more revealing it can be, to the point where some people don't want to do psychedelics, not because they don't enjoy them, but because they're afraid of seeing a glimpse of something that might contradict what they want to believe in their minds. And I understand this, because there's nothing more frustrating to a human than having a belief system that's broken down by one fact that you can't dispute. And I believe I've changed, okay? In the last decade, my opinions on religion and the need for religion have completely changed. My philosophy on belief systems has changed, and I understand completely why we need these different rituals and why people need to believe in something greater than themselves. Because if you don't, you go crazy as a society. Some people can handle it, but most can't. More people spend time justifying why they don't believe than do believe in God sometimes. But if God isn't a capital G, then it doesn't really matter. And when you let go of trying to convince others what you have seen and the feelings that you've had and the understandings you've had, then you can focus more on what's important, which is your connection with that higher power, whatever you call it. It could be the same whether you're a Jew, a Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter. Even agnostic or even an atheist, God forbid, pun intended. You have to be able to look at life in the bigger picture and why it exists at all. Why do things become more and more complex? Why did we evolve consciousness? And why can I be sitting here talking to you on this camera or this phone, which basically is like a super-powered computer, you know, and be able to explain my thoughts on psychedelics in real time? It's a very strange world. Psychedelics, for me, have been a tool that have allowed me to see within myself. I know that YouTube has changed their stance a little bit on some of these things, which is why I'm talking about them again. I have made a few psychedelic podcasts on a side note. If you would like to hear any of them, they're on the 15-minute Free Thinking podcast, which is on all platforms, Apple, Spotify, everywhere. And I pay to host that because I can talk about what I want. And I can say, this is what I've done, these are the experiences I've had. But I feel like it's pretty safe right now to talk about this on YouTube as well, because I think that society has completely shifted in the way that we're seeing these things. They're given for PTSD. I mean, MDMA has been used for PTSD for decades. It's as if we've discovered something new, but the rest of us who already knew about psychedelics are just rolling our eyes like, yeah, we know, we told you this, just like with cannabis and everything else. I think these tools need to be used, and I call them tools specifically. All psychedelics are tools. There are drugs, and then there are tools. And tools are used for a very specific purpose. And whichever key you choose to use will open a different lock. And sometimes, if we've repressed our feelings too much, these emotions can just come flooding out in these experiences. I cannot tell you how many dozens of times I've taken LSD and then amidst a conversation with like 4 or 5 people just started crying and thinking about life, and we're talking about important things that matter to us. Everybody's on the same wavelength. Nobody feels awkward or like, of course you feel a little awkward, but what I mean is that you open up. Part of you has to go away for part of you to come forward. So if you take a large dose of psychedelics, say, a few hundred micrograms of LSD or an eighth of mushrooms, like many people will go through an initial feeling of what they call the come up, but then often will retreat and go into what I call the chrysanthemum. And it's the cocoon for me. It's where my brain is kind of switching gears. It's like pushing and letting go of, pushing away some of the shit that I don't want to think about or that isn't important, right? Daily bullshit. And bringing forward some of the other ideas that do matter. My spirit, my evolution, my connection to the universe. I think that a lot of folks who haven't found that connection are some of the most staunch and vocal supporters for, say, atheism. They're frustrated because they don't have that connection. And I didn't, I guess, see this as much before until I saw the desperation and people arguing their point. They're not happy to believe or not believe what they believe or don't believe. They want to convince others. So it's proselytizing. It's the same way that Christians have tried to convince others this is the true religion. Many atheists do the same thing, under the false premise or belief that not believing in anything is the best option. However, I understand religion on a different realm. We need a different level than I did before. I have a different opinion of it, rather. And I see that many people do need certain direction. For me, God is everything. For somebody else, it might be Jesus. And that's okay. What's important is to let go of these labels and come together on the things that matter. And psychedelics allow us to do this. People build up so many walls to the world around them. They're afraid to look at themselves. They're afraid to look at others. And I feel like this has reached a fevered pitch. I mean, we're at the point now where you go in the grocery store in a lot of places and people just don't even make eye contact. I mean, if you live in a small town, you have a different experience. I live near Portland. I went down to the bookstore to take my son down there yesterday, and it was worse than I could have anticipated. Walking up Burnside in Portland, Oregon was just depressing. People out of their minds, people sleeping out in the middle of the sidewalk. I mean, everywhere. It's like half the people that I encountered were homeless. I have a lot of empathy for that, and I'm not here to say, oh, look, get out of my city. That's not my point here. It's that things have gotten so bad because society has allowed them to get bad. And we don't deal with mental health issues or drug issues the way we should. But the problem that we should be looking at is not how to solve the crisis of the mental health issue, but rather what is causing this mental health problem. And it's a lack of understanding of ourselves. It's a lack of, not always, some people have schizophrenia, several different conditions people can have. But a lot of the time, all it takes is somebody to talk to. And a little bit of thought. We don't give ourselves time to think. And I've seen this firsthand. I know this. I've seen psychosis in action. And if left unattended, it can manifest and multiply. Schizophrenic type episodes where a person thinks that they're being watched or hunted or whatever it might be, where they're having delusions, being able to talk a person down in that situation can take time, can take weeks or months, but eventually the person will recover, especially different types of discussion therapy, which are far more valuable than taking psychiatric drugs, which is basically what we've been doing. So instead of giving people psychedelics, we banned them 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and then decided, hey, we're going to give everybody SSRIs instead. Oh, you're feeling depressed? Don't worry about why you're depressed. Oh, you're feeling anxious? Don't worry about why you're anxious. Just take this pill. You'll be good all day. So people take benzos, people take, Zoloft, whatever it might be. And these things only, it's like a buffer zone. That's all it is. It's like putting a shield around yourself. You're not getting rid of the army that's coming for you. You're just setting up a shield, and that army is still waiting on the other side of the shield for it to deplete, and eventually it will. And often these drugs end up being worse in the long run. We all know quitting benzos, cold turkey can kill you. Can you say the same for smoking weed or taking psychedelics? No, of course not. But yet these things have been demonized as these Schedule I substances that are so harmful. And we know it was a culture war that was waged back in the 60s. During the Vietnam era, they were, that was one of their aims, to get rid of the protesters and a lot of the problems. This has been, documented, Nixon and others saying these things, but that's all falling by the wayside now. Now you can go out and you can actually buy mushrooms here from, you know, whoever's growing them locally. They're not available in stores quite yet, but I remember dreaming when I was younger of being able to get mushrooms down at the store like they had in, you know, if you go over, everybody wanted to go over to Europe so you could go to the one place on earth, right, that had legal weed. But maybe the Dutch had it figured out. Why can't I think of it? Brain fart. But anyway, High Times magazine, all these different, you know, uh, this different literature that we had before the internet. And then once the internet came, we had Arrowwood, which to me was like a godsend. Arrowwood is, and still is, the psychedelic, you know, the place to go to look for psychedelic trips, people's experiences, trip reports, combinations of different drugs. But all this aside, what matters here is that psychedelics are being taken seriously, finally, for the first time in a long time. And it's about time. And it's about time. Because we have very little time in our lives to figure out who we are and to live the best life we can. Like all of you, I have moments where I just feel like, what's the point? I have moments where I'm depressed or I feel anxious. But these things subside. And the easiest way to get them to subside is by bringing into your mind things that you've learned about life that help you to lead better lives. Conquering your fear of death would be the first and foremost, but I won't go into that because a lot of people don't want to hear it. I'll save it for the next video. But psychedelics are like a miniature death. When I was about 18, I remember going down to the bookstore and buying this book at Powell's called The Psychedelic Experience, based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it was written by Timothy Leary and Ralph Metzner. And now Leary was a huge proponent of psychedelics. I believe he did a major disservice to psychedelics because he believed everybody should take them, and proselytized it like it was the, you know, the be-all end-all of life and that it was going to solve all our problems. I understand why, because once you've had that experience, you understand it. A lot of people were scared away. They tried, you know, psychedelics once, maybe took some mushrooms or some acid and had a bad experience and never did it again. You have to understand set and setting, and that was like the first thing in that book was about set and setting. The set is, what is your mindset? Are you free of stresses? Can you turn off your phone or not have to worry about phone calls, things like that? And the setting is, where are you? Are you in a safe place? And if you can find a safe place, some candles, and some people you love, and to have an experience like that, you can have these moments that you never forget. Some of the psychedelic revelations I've had and moments I've had with people are impressed in my mind as if it just happened yesterday. You never forget that. And several of them, sitting out here, up in the woods, in a different place in the woods. Like, I could think of all these different places, but all the places don't matter. Lots of concerts and events. To me, it's not about the experience itself. And I have a coworker, he's like a subcontractor, but he's working with us, and he's going to Burning Man next week. And I was talking about how a lot of people take too many psychedelics and they burn out. And we both agreed that the best experience you can have is not the psychedelic experience in the night itself. And psychedelics are best taken in the evening, in my opinion. But day tripping's fun. But after you go to bed and you wake up the next day, you have an afterglow. That afterglow is, for me, one of the greatest times, because you've still let down your walls and your guard. You still have some of these ideas fresh in your head, and you can just discuss things with people and process life, because ultimately we need each other. We need to process our lives, and we need people to do that with. So thanks for listening. That's about all I want to just cover, some psychedelic discussion here, and I don't want to get into dimethyltryptamine or DMT. I might do a separate video for that, but I'm not here to talk about machine elves and crazy breakthrough canon experiences, because DMT stands in a world of its own. I've done mescaline, and mescaline's phenomenal, but it's not as common, so most people aren't going to find it. I think that LSD and psilocybin mushrooms are probably the most readily available and best introduction to a psychedelic experience. So I'm not going to tell you about dosage. I'm not going to talk about, how much is too much or not enough. The most mushrooms I've ever taken was a 1/4 ounce, and they were very strong, and it was very intense. I wouldn't recommend that dose, but some people have taken plenty more. It's not about how much you take. It's about who you take it with. And I'll just say this, from 30 years ago, I take at least half the dose I used to take. It doesn't take me as much. And honestly, for me, taking psychedelics is like reading a book I've already read again. You always pick up something new, a new line, a new discovery. But I've learned the lessons I need to learn in my heart about maintaining myself in this crazy world, at least, as far as I can see for now. And once in a while, I feel like I need to revisit that page of my life, and I do. So I highly recommend you try it as well if you're able to, and it's legal, and everything is on the up and up, and you have somebody who you can trust. Always trip with the guru, have a sitter. It might be our only solution at this point. Get ourselves out of this bullshit, because society seems very confused right now, and I think we need psychedelics more than ever. You can check me out on Patreon. You can check out my 15-minute free thinking podcast. All those links and all that stuff's available wherever, and I will see you next time. Peace out.